Hi, welcome to another edition of Trap, talking race and politics in cars. Today, our guest is Congressman Maxwell Frost.
Hello, hello. Good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No
Of course,
worries.
of
Let's
course.
go for a drive.
Let's go for a drive.
All right, Congressman. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, well, I was born and raised here in Central Florida. I went to the Osceola County School for the Arts for 7 years. My dad's a musician, full-time musician. He's a pan player, steel pans. He plays all around town, and my mother's a teacher. And for the last decade of my life, I've been an organizer and an activist, fighting to end gun violence, fighting to ensure that we have equity in our justice system, and just fighting for the world I believe in. And it's taken many different forms, from working for candidates to working for organizations, and now I'm a member of Congress. And so, but I just love this community so much. It's my home. A huge part of my life is the arts. Like I said, I went to arts high school, middle school, where I played jazz drums. So always been involved in the local art scene, and also in a lot of the organizing.
Very cool. So, in order to serve in Congress, you have to be like 25 years old, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You are now 26 as of a couple days ago, right?
Yep.
Okay. So do you get any feedback from other congressmen or other congresswomen thinking that you're too young to do this job?
Not really. I mean, I've heard that before, but not from members of Congress on my side. In fact, I've gotten nothing but respect and help from a lot of them. During my campaign, I was endorsed by over a dozen members of Congress who saw our large field of candidates and wanted me to win. And so it really, shows that our caucus, the Democrats in Congress, are excited about new, youthful, young voices, and they want them to thrive. And so haven't really gotten that much on the Democratic side, at least.
So you're also the first Afro-Cuban
Mm-hmm.
to be elected to Congress, to serve in Congress,
Mhm.
right? How does it feel to break that glass ceiling?
I mean, I think about the fact that my mom, my grandma, my aunt came here from Cuba in the late 1960s during the freedom flights. No money, no English, no connections, and now their grandson, my grandma's grandson, is a member of the United States Congress. And I think for my own family, it means the world, but also thinking about the fact that there are so many different parts of a culture and parts of a people that are often forgotten about. And I think one of those is our Black Latinos in this country and outside of this country. I think a little too often we get stuck with what we see here, and people forget that if you go to Cuba, you're gonna see a lot of Black people. A lot of Black people, and you'll turn the corner and you'll be walking and you'll see a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white person, speaking Spanish who's Cuban, and then you'll come and you'll see a Black person, you'll see brown people, and that's really the beautiful thing I love about Cuba and a lot of these Caribbean and also Latin American countries is it's really there are so many folks there with many different their races are very different, but they're all part of that same culture, and that kind of that Latino culture. So it's a beautiful thing, but it means the world. Obviously, I don't see myself as the representative of all Afro-Latinos by any means, but it does mean something, and we should celebrate the first of anything getting into a old institution like the United States Congress.
How do you plan to lead the district different from former Congresswoman Val Demings?
Well, Congresswoman Demings did so much amazing work, and I plan on building on her tradition of excellence. But just like anything, we want to figure out how do we do things better, right? How do we continue that tradition of excellence in new ways that are in touch with the way our economy is moving, the way our technology is moving, and our constituency that's increasingly demanding, wanting more out of their legislators, which I think is important. And so, we're building off of that work. I think the constituent services are incredibly important, and so we'll continue to build out the great work Congresswoman Demings has done. And for me, and this is beyond just this district and the leadership it's had before, but in general, I want to think about how do we really modernize Congress and the way we operate and the way we communicate with people. I'm a super grassroots guy. That's my jam. It's my what I come from, and so figuring out how are we in the community as much as possible. How are we doing everything we can to be in touch with folks? Just last night, even if it's short, right? We stopped by Hiawassee association meeting that was going on, about 25 or so people who are leaders in their community, and just stopped by, and they told me they had never met a member of Congress at that meeting before. They never seen. So just little things like that. I went to Savoy, one of our great gay bars here in Orlando. They were doing a raffle to support Contigo Fund, and I did the raffle for them, and we took a little celebratory shot. So
Nice.
just making Congress more accessible to the people. Folks shouldn't see me on any sort of pedestal. I see myself as part of a greater movement, and I think we're kind of moving in that trend with a lot of our politics, and it's an honor to play a small role in that.
Nice. What are your thoughts on how Governor DeSantis is handling this whole woke movement thing that he's doing?
Yeah, I mean it's horrible, and I always I like to talk very candidly about this, because I feel like all too often even Democrats will chalk this up to culture wars, and that's a huge part of this. But his rhetoric and this legislation has real impact. People will get hurt. People will die because of him fanning the flames of white supremacy, bigotry, homophobia, anti-Semitism in this state. It's not just a culture war. It's not just something to roll your eyes at. It's something to organize against. Things like blocking schools from talking about or having programs that are diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Things like ensuring that high schools can't teach AP African American history when they can teach every other AP class there is. Doing things like passing bills to make sure that our LGBTQ plus students can't talk about who they are as people. All that fans the flames of bigotry in this state, and we're seeing a rise in hate crime. We're seeing a rise in racism and white supremacy in this state, and folks shouldn't be surprised about where it's coming from. That leadership is coming from the top. So we have to be honest. We are dealing with a governor who I believe acts like a dictator, who plays into this nationalist, fascist ideology that is about condemning the most vulnerable communities due to the failures of our leaders. And I don't think that's the right way to think about things. I think it's bigoted. I think it's really dangerous, and we have to organize around it.
As far as law enforcement is concerned in the criminal justice system, how do we get in there and kind of change some of the things that are happening right now that we're seeing that's causing a lot of this divide, this racial divide?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we as a country, I think we need to take a step back and reimagine what public safety really means and really talk about that. Right now, when you think about public safety, you think about one thing and one entity, which is policing. And policing does play a large role in our public safety, of course. My question is, how do we expand our thinking about what public safety is? And how do we take some of that onus and that responsibility and put it on the communities themselves? And and the ACLU's done a lot of work on this, and a lot of great organizations have. When communities are able to have the resources and just the information resources they need to really stop violence before it happens, it's better for everybody. It takes more burden off our police department. It gives us safer communities, safer streets. It allows communities that have a vested interest and stake in their own home. And on top of that, it helps, get rid of a lot of the negative interactions that folks have with law enforcement, especially within the Black and brown poor communities. And that's when we're talking about the school to prison pipeline, etc. And so for me, it's how do we stop this violence? How do we stop crime before it even happens? We need proactive measures, not just reactionary ones. We have the most people jailed in the world, and it's important that we do everything we can to curb these issues at the root causes. And I think community intervention is at the top of my list.
As far as our elders, we're seeing a lot nowadays of elders trying to stretch their budgets.
Mhm.
They're trying to decide between food and medication, because they don't have a lot of money. How do we help you? Because obviously you can't do it all by yourself.
Mhm.
How do we get behind you to help you kind of work out this issue?
No, this is great. I mean, I think there's a lot to it, right? And politics at the end of the day, and when you talk about Congress, right, I'm one of 435 people. I get one vote just like everybody else. I don't say that to diminish my position, but I like to level set. We got to know what the landscape is. And right now, we have a Republican majority, and one of our two U.S. senators has even brought up, Senator Rick Scott, sunsetting and getting rid of Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare every, I think, 5 years. And so for me, it's important that we realize what we're up against, the fact that we need the votes, we need the math to be able to not just protect it. We shouldn't just be on the defense, but strengthen the programs we already have. I'm for Medicare for all. I believe everybody in this country should have health care no matter who they are. I also believe that our elders, after a life of service working in their community, deserve to retire with dignity and deserve to retire with the resources they need to live their lives and not worry about pinching pennies left and right. My grandma passed away just a few months ago. She came here from Cuba, worked her entire life to support my family, and seeing the check she got wasn't enough, right? All the time, and she was really pinching pennies all the time. And I really feel like we need to treat our elders with more respect. We need to allow people to retire with dignity and retire at an age that they want to retire at, that makes sense. We see that the age of retirement, people are waiting and waiting and waiting because they're doing the math and they're understanding that, man, if I retire at 60, 65, around there, I'm not going to have the money I need to really relax. And we see people pushing their retirement because they're doing the math and they're seeing that the system isn't working in favor for them.
As far as homelessness is concerned, Orlando's got a growing problem with homelessness. One story aired around the holidays and on the news, one of the local news channels, and it said that some of the people who were there volunteering at those holiday, serving dinners and, helping to provide shelter for homeless people, are now in line. How do we help you also with this homeless problem?
I think there's two things. I think a lot of times when we think about homelessness, we, and again, with everything, we got to think about short-term solutions. We got to think of long-term solutions. When we think about fixing this problem of, and I actually like to say houselessness, because a lot of folks who don't have, it's a difference between a house and a home. You know what I mean? A lot of folks who actually don't have a brick and mortar house do have a home in the form of communities, whether they're tent communities that we see a lot over in Paramore or in different areas. And so a lot of these folks, they have a home, but it's up to us to really see the fact that their home is not adequate for what a human should be living in. So for houseless folks who don't have a house, who don't have a roof over their head, there's two things. Short term is, I believe in these housing first initiatives. I think there's a lot of creative things that we can do in taking a lot of properties, whether they're old hotels, etc., making sure that we get people into housing. But we also have to put more resources behind that to help people through their problems. We hear all the time, you'll hear people say, I don't like to give, I walk by a houseless person, I don't want to give them money because they're going to spend it on this and that or whatever, right? Which isn't true for everybody. But there is validity in noticing that many houseless folks are dealing with problems of addiction. And it's important for us to realize that a lot of that comes from the fact that they are houseless, that they are living without, not in a home. And it's important for us to realize that and to really get to the humanity of every single person. Everybody deserves to have a home, and we shouldn't cast aside people who are dealing with serious mental health or addiction issues. We're talking about folks who don't have access to mental health care in the way that they should. And so there's a lot of problems there, and I think there's the short term to fix what we got now. The next is the long term, what you talked about with people who would be volunteering to help houseless folks and then find themselves needing those same services a year or two later. And that's when we get to bold economic policies that ensure that people can actually live in this country and have the resources they need. That's why I'm for, again, Medicare for all. We know a leading cause of debt in this country is medical debt and people not having the ability to be healthy. I think we deserve to be healthy by virtue of being alive, and that's it. In one of the richest countries on the face of the earth, I think everyone should have healthcare free at the point of service. The next thing is ensuring housing is a human right. Everybody should have a roof over their head. There's economic policies we can put into place to ensure that we're appropriating funds into affordable housing units, mixed income housing units, and making sure people are able to live where they're growing up, if that's where they want to live. So there's a lot we can do, and there's the short-term things that are really important, but we can't let go of these long-term solutions or people are going to continue to slip into poverty and slip into not having a house. And for me, it's important that we talk about both things.
So you talked about your family. What put the fire behind this? Was your family, your grandmother, mother, father, did they foster you in this as you got into politics?
Yeah. So I've always lived in a pretty political household. Like my dad, he's a yell at the news kind of guy, and I would listen to him and I would watch the news. And in elementary school, I had to go to school and pick debates with kids, not knowing what the hell I'm talking about. But so that was always in the house, but I never wanted to get into politics. It wasn't until the Sandy Hook shooting that I really wanted to get involved. I remember sitting at a restaurant before a jazz band concert at my high school and seeing those images of kids being marched out of the elementary school when somebody walked into Newtown Elementary School and murdered 20 students and 6 teachers. And seeing that had a big impact on me. I remember I went back to the jazz band concert and I was thinking, I don't want to get shot in school. And that's really the reason I got involved in politics, is because I was scared of getting shot in school. And you know how it is. You get involved for one reason, and then you find out we got a lot of problems. But for every problem, there's multiple solutions. And then you start meeting the people in this work, and the people, those are the folks who keep you in it for a long time. And so that's what really inspired that conviction in me, was the Sandy Hook shooting.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about you, about Washington, your experience up there?
I would love to tell everyone this. I think it's important that we build a community infrastructure that respects every portion of advocacy, right? And I've had the honor of being able to both work on campaigns, knocking doors, on the staff side. I've worked on issue advocacy amendment 4, etc. I've worked as a musician, planning events and helping with the culture of our community, and now I'm an elected. I've also protested and been arrested for nonviolent protests. And I think a lot of times you talk with people about advocacy and you hear people say, voting doesn't matter, no one needs to vote. Then you go on the other side of that and hear people say, marching doesn't matter, we don't need to march, we don't need to protest. And as someone who's been a part of all of this, I would say that we need all of it. We need to use every tool in our toolbox. Our opposition is too strong. Our opposition is well funded. Our opposition, they're well organized, and we can't afford to be split up just because of tactics. We have to come together around this. It doesn't mean you have to do all these things at the same time, but respect it and understand that the value it brings to our movement. And so I always tell everyone, go protest, go vote. Be involved in your arts and your community. Do the work you need to do. Get that mutual aid done so we can support our own community. And just respect every part of this, because we can't afford to lose anybody right now.
So tell me, why did you get arrested at the George Floyd protests?
Well, I wasn't the only one, as we know.
Oh, no, I think it was great, by the way.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I'm not judging you. I think it was great.
No, for sure. Well, the protest that I protested every day for multiple months, and we were doing a nonviolent protest. We were walking on the street. We were actually heading back to our cars. It was the end of the protest, which is the part that always gets me about my specific situation. And then they started arresting people, and I even said, I said, officer, I could see my car. We're actually done. We're just walking back, but we were still all arrested. I think it was about 7 or 8 of us. And spent the night in jail there. And I had one experience that I always like to talk about, and it's the fact that I had a CEO come up to me and say, I guess you'll think twice about protesting or something like that, which is a horrible thing to say.
Wow.
But you know, and this isn't to talk bad about all CEOs, this is just my truth. You know, they would come up to they put me in this timeout unit because I refused to say why I was arrested. I said nonviolent protest. They wanted me to say disorderly conduct. Put me in a timeout unit with one of our protesters. And one of our guys was saying he was hungry. And one of the CEOs actually came up and was eating a burger, like right on the window. You know, it's stuff like that. Where's the humanity in our justice system when people are doing that? And you know, most of the people who are those CEOs, they look like you and I.
Right.
So and that's when we talk about not everything is face value. We got to really look at these systems and figure out how are we introducing humanity into them. I remember, you know, we were in the cell, and I hear all this yelling, and there's all these CEOs holding this buff guy, and they're bringing him to our cell. He's obviously mad. He's punching and screaming, and they bring him in there, and one of the CEOs like looks at me and smiles, and I'm like, you know, obviously they're trying to intimidate us, and I was intimidated. I was scared. I'd never been to jail before. I don't work out too much, so I was like kind of scared. But they let go of this guy, and when they left, he went to a corner and he started to cry. You know, and that experience for me really taught me, you know, not everyone needs to have a hand. No one deserves to have a hand around their throat. Sometimes you just need love, and it looks like that guy just needed to emote and needed to just be human for a little bit. So, you know, these are my experiences, the things I think about, and obviously I was just there for a day. There are folks who are behind bars for a lifetime, and so either way.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you so much for writing with me today.
Of course.
I appreciate that.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
No worries. I'm going to invite you back again.
Please do. Please do.
All right. Thank you.